Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Backfire Zealot. So we have Backfire's newest street board here, the Zealot. It's been all the rage. Everyone on Reddit seems to be buying them. Very popular board. And I just wanted to give you my opinion as a fat guy riding a entry-level street board for the first time, coming from really high-end mountain boards like Trampa, and how I feel about it. So before I bought this board, I watched Mr. Phillips' review on this board. I believe he calls himself the Change Agent on YouTube. And in that video, he talks about the meaning of zealot, somebody who's like fanatical and uncompromising in the pursuit of their beliefs, such as religion, that sort of thing. And then he questions, why would Backfire call this the Zealot? Well, I think I have an idea. Because there are so many zealots when it comes to belt drives. So many people who just won't compromise. They will only use belt drives, and they're like 100% against hub motors. Don't buy hub motors, they suck. And so they made a hub drive board for those fanatics. So the Zealot comes with a 12S Hobbywing ESC and two Hobbywing 5255 motors. I mean, nothing to write home about. Pretty standard equipment in the world of electric street boards these days. The Hobbywing thing is everywhere. Like, its only competition is the Ling Yi. I mean, they pretty much dominate the market of these little, smaller street boards right now. It does come with this much larger than most boards 311 watt-hour battery. And what's really cool about that is they put some fancy lights on the side. However, I don't like the rectangles. It looks a little dated, a little 1970s, but that's okay. But while we're talking about the enclosure, you can see it actually hangs down a few inches. It's pretty deep compared to the electronic speed controller here. And you can see I've got some scratches, and that's only from a couple rides. I know that Mr. Phillips says that this thing doesn't bottom out for his 225-pound weight, but I'm just under that at 220 pounds, and I actually bottom out right here if I do like some foot adjustments mid-ride, or if I'm on rough ground, and it just bottoms out. So I don't know what he's talking about. It doesn't bottom out often though. It's rare, but it does happen. And it's got these little rubber plugs here, like for the USB port and for the charging port. The charging port has this nice ring. It seems to go in there pretty well. But the USB port, it doesn't go in very far, so it's always falling out on me. It just pops out. I really don't trust these around water. So the plastic enclosure looks okay. It's nothing exciting. It's just a very basic, rounded off, enclosure. Not a big fan of it, and nothing to write home about. They could have put some cool design to it other than those lights that look like they're from the 1970s. I do really wish it was like RGB, or I don't know, maybe a purple to match the board, or something other than just the white light. But it does complement the headlights pretty well. So it's pretty cool for riding at night. Gives you some side view. But that's on the other Backfire boards also, so you guys know plenty about that. The enclosure, if you were to take it off the board, does have a top plastic panel to give it some water resistance. But with those rubber plugs on the front, I don't think it's going to help that much. It's not a board I would be taking into too much water. I have pretty fat fingers, so the remote here has a fairly small hole, and as you can see, it like just fits my finger. It's absolutely impossible for me to wear a glove with this remote, which is kind of sad, so I have to go gloveless when riding this board. I really hope Backfire realizes that people have much larger hands than this, and gives us a much better option. In fact, I prefer remotes that don't have the finger holes, that are just not limited by a finger hole. Go ahead and put like a hook or like a little thing to grab onto, but not the finger hole. Get rid of that. It does have like this matte finish, which makes it a little grippy. I think the buttons are fairly easy to reach. I know a lot of people were talking about how the buttons kind of sucked. I think they're fine. The wheel does feel a little soft, and the spring in there could be a little tighter. It does also have a long throw. I'm used to running the Trampa wand most of the time, and it has a much tighter spring and a much shorter throw, so it's way more accurate with each little movement compared to the Zealot, which has and almost like twice as much movement. Also, aluminum remote, super heavy, plastic remote, super light. But of course, this design is not, I don't know, it's not a good design for the hand. It doesn't feel good in the hand either, but I can wear my gloves with it. I did see some reviews complaining about where these buttons are located and like not being able to tell without looking. But I mean, how many people are really just like smashing their buttons while rolling down the road? They're just like, I'm going to slow down now, bring my thumb down here, and I'm going to turn my lights on and off a few times, and I'm going to go back to riding. You know what? I don't like sport mode. I'm going to go back to economy mode. You know, I'm going to go back to sport mode. I don't think that's happening. The most people are doing while riding this board is maybe hitting the turbo button to get up a hill. And I don't know. It's pretty easy to find the turbo button without looking. So no complaints on button positions or anything. Just it does feel cheap. I don't like the long throw. I hate the hole. So unfortunately, the remote battery doesn't last very long. I get about a ride and a half. One time I only got one ride in and my remote battery died, and that was from a full charge. And I really don't like that. I really wish the battery lasted longer than the remote. I find myself charging the remote all the time, needing to charge the remote after every single ride just in case. It's crazy because my Dickey Ho remotes, which are probably some of the cheapest remotes ever that I use on some of my DIY mountain boards, those remotes last for weeks and weeks before the battery dies. My Tramper remote, the Trampa wand, if you put an Energizer in there, that thing, I put the Energizer lithium in there, and that thing will last like a month of riding before you have to change the battery, sometimes longer. The battery is insane. Maytech though, I guess Maytechs are garbage just like that. Maytechs come with a tiny little battery, so not a big fan of Maytech in any way. But, I mean, it gets you through one ride, and I guess that's all it needs to do, but then you gotta charge both. On a positive note, it does come with the cable, and you can charge the remote with the board, which is awesome. One thing I found really weird after coming from like a much higher end board and all my other boards are running some sort of VESC is that I have to flip a switch to go into reverse. That feels really awkward, and I really don't like that on hills, and the board just seems to roll after you stop. I mean, it comes to a stop, it stops fine, but then you kind of roll, and you have to get off the board. But with my mountain boards, you know, you can just stop, and there's enough torque there to just hold your position. On a super steep hill where maybe you need a little bit more, you can just pull back reverse a little bit and the board will still hold your position. Or pull it hard and go backwards up the hill, whatever you want to do. I do miss that feature. I don't understand why there's this necessity to flip a switch to go into reverse. You guys can fill me in on that. I guess this is fairly common on a lot of different boards. What's the purpose of separating reverse from forward and braking? You guys feel it's safer? Fill me in. So I'm 220 pounds, and the range on this thing is not the 17 claim, but it's almost there for a fat guy. I'm actually getting about 15 and a half, depending on the ride, depending on what I'm doing, somewhere in there. One time I got like 14.8, and I take the battery all the way down so the thing's pretty much dead. I got a long ride, a long commute, but I take different directions to work sometimes. So the range is pretty good. I can't complain about that. Almost everybody has less range than what they're advertising, and when you're a big, heavy guy like me, it significantly reduces that range also. So, yeah, range is awesome. 15 miles, that's perfect for a street board. It gets me where I need to go. Another cool thing is the charger can charge the board to full in 3 hours. So I can charge it up while I'm at work, I can charge it up while I'm at a buddy's house, I can charge it up while I'm at dinner, and I can be back on the streets getting some carving in. So I found it funny that on Backfire's website, they have an image there where it shows the board and it says deep concave. But for the most part, this board is flat. It's super flat. And I'm okay with that. The Trampa's flat, my mountain boards are flat, but I use bindings on those, so it's a little different. So I don't really even know what it feels like to have that concave unless we talk about like my skateboards that I use for like doing tricks like flips and stuff. So I'm not a longboarder. However, it does feel super flat. I would not call this a flex deck, especially if you're a heavy guy like me. I would call it a squish deck. This deck is squishy. I wouldn't even say it's bouncy. It's more like spongy. Um, it doesn't have the rebound that I'm used to on a flexible deck. In fact, it has almost no rebound. It feels very soft. I do not like this deck for my weight. It significantly contributes to bottoming out on things that I'm unhappy to be bottoming out on. I really wish that they sold two deck options, one for heavier people, one for lighter people, or they come out with a Zealot that uses the G3 carbon deck maybe, and you pay a premium for that. I would have paid for that. This deck is way too spongy for 220 pounds. The Caliber 2 trucks felt super stable. I was ripping on this thing at max speed in several places on smooth concrete, of course, and I never really had any issues with wobbles. They felt super stable. I still had the stock bushings in there. I am running Riptides now because I'm a little heavy. I wanted slightly harder bushings than they came with it. But even the knockoff Caliber rear truck seems to handle just fine. I think Backfire did a really good job sticking with the calibers. I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, X-Way has their own truck now. It might be better. I don't know. I never rode an X-Way, but these trucks feel great. Stable is stable. Backfire's urethane is much better than I thought it would be. These Backfire 96mm wheels are actually quite soft. I took this through a little bit of rough, a little bit of gravel here and there, definitely down some really rough asphalt roads. There's some small little holes here and there, nothing too crazy, and the board held up really well. I don't have any chips or anything coming out of the wheels, and the ride was stable, and it wasn't too bouncy. I'm not used to longboards though, and I did run into one problem. The vibration. I'm not used to that vibration when all I've rode is pneumatic tires. After about 10 miles, my feet start to get numb and hot, and I gotta take a break. Actually, I usually take a break like every 4 miles or so, just because I don't want them to go numb while I'm riding, because you feel everything through the board, and I'm not used to that. It looks like a lot of other experienced riders are saying that the board is really smooth, so I'd hate to feel those boards that don't have the risers on there and don't have the softer urethane wheels, because that'd be a pretty rough ride. So I was GPSing my speed and using the remote to find out how fast I could go, and my GPS is saying I'm going a little slower than my remote is saying that I'm going. So going off the GPS, I was able to hit just over 27 miles per hour, which is way more than I need for a board this small. If I'm going to go high speed, I'm definitely going to be going on one of the mountain boards. Much wider trucks, way more stable, and I don't have to worry about any rocks or debris. However, this board was pretty stable. I didn't have any wobbles. It was pretty good. I enjoyed smooth paths and high speed. Coming from high-end mountain boards, the torque on this thing feels a little weak, especially when going up even graceful, not so sharp inclines. I mean, it goes up them no problem, but it can't really pick up speed going up them, and I'm used to boards that don't even know they're going up a hill. And with the Backfire, I can hear the sound change in the motors. I can definitely hear it straining much more than my other boards. So that was interesting to see because I haven't really experienced that, but it goes up hills fine. It stops on hills fine. It seems okay, just not that massive high impact torque that I'm used to. One thing I'm really liking about having a small street board like this is portability. You know, a lot of you out there don't think this is the most portable board, but for me, it's super portable. You can pick this thing up with one hand. That's awesome. One hand, just pick it up, whip it around, throw it in your trunk. There's no way I can just throw my mountain boards in my trunk. They just don't fit. I gotta put the seat down, and less people can ride with me in the station wagon. This board, I can throw anywhere on the floor of the car. I can have it in my lap in the passenger seat. It can just go. It's so small. And I love how light it is. You can just pick it up literally with your fingers, and you don't have to use two hands. And I can just walk into a store with it. never had a board that light before, so really cool being able to have that convenience. So I bought the Backfire Canon 2 lights just so it matched my board. I could have gone with shred lights, but they're actually harder to get here in China. However, after mounting the lights on my board, I ran into a few problems. The first problem I ran into is that the hardware is just not long enough. The lights came with a couple of shock pads, and you can't even put the shock pads on because the hardware is not long enough to bolt the lights on with the hardware. Even without using the shock pads and just mounting the lights on the board, the hardware on the board is so short that it puts too much pressure on the shock pad and compresses the shock pad in order to get any tension on the bolts. So, unfortunately, it can't properly be adjusted without actually going out and buying your own hardware. I really think that the lights should come with the longer hardware, so when you buy them you can put them on, or come with a notice saying, hey, buy this hardware so your lights can be mounted, or buy this hardware so your lights can be mounted properly. One cool thing about the Canon 2 lights though is it comes with a crazy splitter cable, and the crazy splitter cable allows you to charge your remote and charge both lights all at the same time. I've actually never seen a Type-C split out like that before, and it works. I can charge my remote and both lights at the same time, knock it out, and get on with my ride. I do have the new version of the Zealot, so it doesn't have the issue with the grub screws coming loose. At least I don't think. They haven't come loose yet. I am getting some rattling. I did pull both wheels off and check the grub screws on the pulleys and put my wheels back on, and I'm only getting that rattle while I'm carving, so I'm thinking maybe it's like a spacer between the bearings. I don't know. I gotta pull the bearings out of the wheels and check because everything else seems fine. I checked all the motor bolts and nothing seems to be loose.